At 11:43, my internal dashboard showed activity while I was asleep. Not a crash, not a deletion, just access, clean, deliberate, patient. Whoever it was opened folders, hovered, and left. No files moved, no edits saved, no fingerprints, the kind of visit meant to test whether I was watching. The system logged the session as authorized. Correct permissions, correct role, correct clearance. Everything matched my profile, except one thing: it wasn't me. The easy move would have been to call a T, force a reset, make noise. I didn't. Panic is loud. This was quiet. Whoever logged in wasn't stealing yet. They were measuring distance, checking doors, counting seconds. They wanted to know if I'd flinch. I didn't. Before I go on, I want to be clear about one thing. Some details in the story that follows have been intentionally fictionalized and enhanced with AI assistance for educational and emotional impact. If this kind of story isn't for you, feel free to step away, rest early, and take care of yourself. Your well-being matters more than any story. I pulled the access history again. Same device family as the office, same internal network window. A careful choice. Someone who knew how alarms were triggered. Someone who understood our controls enough to dance around them. If you wanted my work, you could have asked. This wasn't curiosity. This was rehearsal. I closed the dashboard and went to work like nothing happened. No emails, no warnings, no locks changed. I let the room stay exactly the same, because traps only work when they look like habits. By noon, I was certain of one thing. The person who logged in knew me enough to believe I wouldn't react. And they were right. Many people have endured moments like this in silence, and these stories are told for you. If you'd like to keep listening to stories about quiet justice in the workplace, consider subscribing so you don't miss what comes next. We still have a little more road to walk together. I knew who it was the moment the system showed a second fingerprint on my work. Julian Cole. The new hire. The one CEO Scott Danner liked to call our rising star. She had arrived with polished confidence and immediate protection, the kind that comes before proof. While I stayed quiet in the background, she was introduced as momentum, potential, leadership material in motion. Looking back, the signs were obvious. Julian never asked directly for ownership. She asked to take a quick look at a file. She asked how I organized folders, how drafts moved to finals. Once, smiling lightly, she said, "You're very protective of your work." It sounded harmless. It wasn't. Was she trying to steal credit? Probably. I had built the systems she needed, but never understood. For years, I had been the one translating chaos into structure, turning scattered ideas into logic, data, and decisions that survived scrutiny. I didn't present, I didn't perform, I made things hold. Julian wanted results without inheritance. The late-night login wasn't theft yet, it was reconnaissance. She hadn't taken anything because she didn't know what mattered. Not yet. Real leverage isn't obvious unless you've built it. I understood then that she wasn't finished. She was testing boundaries, measuring silence, watching to see if I would react. If I had changed my password or alerted IT, she would have learned to hide better. So I left everything untouched. Instead, I started preparing. Quietly, methodically, I created 9 files designed to look valuable, complete, and ready to claim. Each one polished, each one flawed in a way only time would reveal. If Julian wanted a path forward, I decided to give her one. I watched, waited, and documented everything, knowing patience would turn her curiosity into evidence she couldn't escape later on. 9 strategic files, same templates, same headers, same visual language leadership trusted. Anyone skimming them would see competence, confidence, and direction. The logic sounded right at first glance. Target segments aligned on the surface. Budgets appeared balanced. Positioning statements echoed phrases executives like to hear. But underneath, every file leaned subtly wrong. Audiences were adjacent, not core. Allocations favored channels with low conversion. Messaging contradicted brand history just enough to fracture trust later. I didn't poison the work. I let her poison herself. Each file carried a name designed to attract someone who wanted ownership more than understanding. Final executive direction. Board ready summary. Approved strategy version. Labels that suggested authority without ever claiming it. The kind of files people open when they want to skip the work and take the credit. At the same time, I built the real strategy elsewhere. A separate folder. Restricted access. Clean logs. Every assumption documented. Every data source traceable. If anyone ever asked how decisions were made, I could show them line by line without raising my voice. This wasn't revenge. It was containment. I worked evenings to avoid attention, saving versions slowly, deliberately. I let timestamps accumulate naturally. Nothing rushed, nothing hidden too well. Traps fail when they look intentional. I needed these files to feel discovered, not delivered. Then I did one final thing. I adjusted permissions just enough to be visible, not open, visible, enough to register as available to someone already inside my account, enough to suggest value without invitation. I leaned back and closed my laptop. If Julian wanted proof of her own brilliance, I had just given her 9 opportunities to demonstrate it. All she had to do was take the next step. Control isn't loud, it's patient, structured, and mercilessly calm. And by the time she realized what she had opened, the system would already know exactly who she was and why she failed. She logged in again 3 nights later. This time, there was no hesitation. The system showed a clean sequence of Access 9 files, opened in order. Each one held just long enough to understand its shape. No comments, no questions, no messages asking for clarification. Julian didn't need permission anymore. She believed she had already earned it. I watched quietly. I didn't interrupt. I didn't correct anything. I let the silence do its work. A few days later, the echoes began. During a team meeting, Julian clicked through slides that felt uncomfortably familiar. The structure was mine. The pacing was mine. Even the transitions followed patterns I had refined over years. She smiled and said, "What we're proposing here is a bold but logical shift." The words were new. The spine was not. I kept my head down, typing notes I didn't need. Every timestamp mattered. Every reused phrase mattered. I saved screen captures. I archived meeting recordings. Evidence isn't dramatic, it's repetitive. Julian grew bolder. She spoke faster. She stopped checking her language around me. In one review session, she gestured toward a slide and said, "This framework solves the problem at its core." I almost laughed. The core was exactly where I had broken it. Patience looks passive from the outside. Inside, it's active restraint. I tracked access logs nightly, watching how often she returned to those 9 files. Always late, always alone, always confident. Then came the moment that confirmed everything. I opened one of the shared documents and felt the shift immediately. My name was gone, cleanly removed, replaced with hers. Centered beneath the title like a signature, Julian Cole, lead strategist. No message, no explanation, just revision history, quietly rewritten. I closed the file and smiled. She hadn't just taken the bait, she had claimed ownership of it, and by doing so, she had locked herself into every flaw I had planted, every assumption I had designed to collapse. From that moment on, the trap no longer needed my attention. It was already working. All I had to do was wait and let process finish. At this point, "Do you feel something is about to happen?" Julian stopped pretending after that, in meetings. She spoke as if the work had always been hers. She presented slides built on my structure and said, "I developed this approach to challenge conventional assumptions." Heads nodded. When someone asked a difficult question about feasibility, she smiled and replied, "It's disruptive thinking. Discomfort means we're doing it right." The room accepted that like a magic phrase. Scott Danner backed her without hesitation. "Julian brings vision," he said once, glancing past me. "Davina supports execution. Support!" The word settled in my chest like sediment. I didn't correct him. I wrote it down. Silence, I had learned, is louder when documented. Each public claim tightened something inside me. I wasn't angry enough to explode. I was focused enough to prepare. I began assembling a full record access logs, version histories, timestamps, meeting transcripts. I added notes of my own, calm observations that explained patterns without accusation. Evidence works best when it doesn't argue. Julian grew comfortable. She forwarded files with her name on them and copied leadership. Finalized direction attached, she wrote. Confident and concise. I watched carefully, commenting only when necessary. Never enough to slow her down. In private, I thought. If she slows, she might notice. Momentum was my ally. There were moments I wanted to stop it, to speak up, to reclaim what was mine before it went further. But I reminded myself why I had started this. Truth survives pressure. Lies need speed. The final escalation arrived quietly. One afternoon, an email notification appeared. Marked external. Julian had sent the entire deck to our largest client ahead of the official review. No caveats, no internal disclaimers, just confidence. I stared at the screen, feeling the weight finally settle. She hadn't just believed her lie. She had committed it, publicly, irreversibly, and now there was no clean way back for her. Only forward into what she had chosen. I stayed silent. Not because I was weak, but because timing mattered. And the system was already recording everything she would later swear never happened. When questions finally arrived from the client, they didn't ask loudly. They asked precisely. Emails arrived with subject lines that looked neutral, but weren't clarification. Alignment, confirmation. Each question touched the exact weak points I had designed. Budget logic, audience assumptions, brand tone, the kind of questions that expose structure, not style. Julian waved them off in leadership syncs. Everything is solid, she said, tapping the deck. They're just adjusting to a new way of thinking. Scott nodded. Relieved. He preferred confidence to accuracy. I watched quietly, heart steady, fingers still, letting the moment mature. Inside, I understood something important. Julian couldn't retreat anymore. Pulling the deck would mean admitting she had rushed it. Revising it would mean explaining where the logic came from. Silence was her only option. And silence only works until someone with authority speaks. The client spoke again the next morning. This time, they requested a live walkthrough. Cameras on. Leadership present. Julian smiled when she read the email. Perfect. She said, we'll impress them. I didn't correct her. I updated my evidence folder instead. Access logs, edit trails, screen captures, everything labeled, chronological, unemotional. Waiting isn't passive when you know exactly what you're waiting for. That afternoon, Scott stopped by my desk. He didn't sit. I want you on the client call tomorrow, he said, just in case they have technical questions. The phrasing mattered, not strategy, not ownership, backup. Of course, I replied as he walked away. I felt the tension tighten, not snap. Backup meant proximity. Proximity meant visibility. Julian had closed every exit except one, and she hadn't realized she'd placed me exactly where I needed to be. That night, I didn't rehearse. I didn't rewrite anything. I slept, knowing the deck would be presented exactly as it was sent, and that every unanswered question would point back to its source. There was no turning back now, only forward, into the meeting where preparation finally meets daylight. I waited calmly, trusting time, records, and silence to do what confrontation never could, under pressure and observation from everyone present. Don't leave yet. The next part is where everything starts to shift. I felt the shift before anyone said it out loud. The client's questions started politely, then sharpened, one slide at a time. Assumptions were tested and found thin. Budget ratios didn't match historical performance. Target segments conflicted with past positioning. Brand tone drifted away from what they had spent years protecting. Each question landed like a pin. Small but exact. Julian answered quickly. Too quickly. That's a matter of data interpretation, she said, smiling. We're intentionally reframing the inputs. When pressed again, she added, discomfort is part of innovation. Her voice stayed confident, but her hands stopped moving. I noticed. I always notice. The room cooled. Laptops closed. Pens paused. The client stopped nodding and started waiting. Silence stretched. Heavy and expectant. Julian flipped back a slide, then forward again, searching for a version where the logic held. It didn't. Scott shifted in his chair. He had been relaxed when the meeting started. Arms open, posture loose. Now he sat upright, eyes narrowing. Confidence without answers has a shelf life, and hers had expired. I stayed still, breathing slow, pulse controlled. This wasn't panic time. This was recognition. Every flaw they uncovered traced back to a choice Julian had claimed as hers. She tried once more. The numbers support the direction, she said. You just have to view them differently. The client didn't respond. They looked at Scott. Scott looked at me. The silence broke with a question that felt heavier than the rest. Davina, he said. Careful now. Can you explain this? Every head turned. Julian froze. The smile finally gone. I felt the lock release inside my chest. Not relief, not triumph, just clarity. This was the moment preparation waits for. I nodded once, opened my notebook, and spoke, knowing there was no hiding place left for her now. I met the client's eyes calmly, aware that facts, timing, and documentation were about to replace confidence, performance, and borrowed authority in that room without drama or raised voices. I didn't raise my voice when I began. I opened the real files and let them speak. I walked the room through the strategy step by step, not performing, not selling, just explaining. The target audience aligned with their historical data. The budget distribution followed actual conversion rates. The positioning respected brand memory instead of fighting it. Heads nodded. Slowly at first, then with recognition. This matches what we've been seeing internally. One executive said. Another leaned forward. Why wasn't this version sent? I answered calmly and kept moving. I pulled up the access logs next. Dates, times, user IDs, clean, factual. No adjectives required. These show when my account was accessed. I said. And which files were opened? I clicked again and displayed metadata, creation timestamps, author fields, version histories. Julian shifted beside me. That doesn't prove intent, she said. Her voice sounded smaller now. It proves sequence. I replied. Intent comes later. The timeline filled the screen. When the files were created, when they were copied, when names were changed, when the deck was sent externally, each action stacked on the last. Impossible to separate. The room went quiet in a way that felt final. Scott didn't interrupt. The client didn't either. Silence had replaced argument. This strategy, I said, returning to the first slide, is the one I built for your business. The other version was never client-ready. I paused, and it was never mine once it left this folder. No one defended her. No one asked for justification. The evidence didn't invite debate. It closed it. I stepped back from the screen and waited. The quiet wasn't awkward. It was decisive. The kind of silence that only appears after truth finishes speaking. That was the moment I felt it lift. The weight, the restraint, control returning to where it belonged. Not through confrontation, but through record, structure, and time. I stayed silent, knowing justice rarely announces itself loudly, and that the system, once aligned with truth, enforces consequences without emotion, apology, or spectacle. Only outcomes everyone in that room could finally see clearly. Unmistakably, permanently, Julian didn't go quietly when the room stopped protecting her. She pushed back immediately, voice rising just enough to sound wrong. This is a misunderstanding, she said. I was set up. Davina manipulated the files. She looked around, searching for sympathy. I didn't look back. Emotion was her last tool, and it was already dull. I've learned something about systems over the years. They don't care how confident you sound or how unfair something feels. They record actions, timestamps, and sequences. Feelings don't overwrite logs. Narratives don't erase metadata. Julian kept talking. She called it a trap. She called it intentional. She said I should have stopped her sooner if there was a problem. That part almost made me smile. Accountability only becomes urgent when consequences arrive. Scott finally raised his hand. Enough, he said. His voice wasn't angry. It was administrative. He turned to her and asked a single question. Did you send the deck to the client? Julian hesitated, then nodded. Yes. But that's all, he said. Security wasn't dramatic. No shouting, no escort by force. Just a quiet request for Julian to step outside. She tried once more. Turning back toward the table. You're making a mistake, she said. No one responded. When the door closed, the room exhaled. Scott didn't look at me when he spoke next. Effective immediately, he said. Julian Cole is no longer with this company. No committee, no delay. Decisions like that don't need discussion when evidence is complete. I felt nothing sharp, just cold clarity. This wasn't personal, it was structural. She broke trust, then documented it herself. By the end of the day, HR finalized the paperwork. Access revoked, title removed. The system adjusted like she had never been essential at all. I packed my notebook slowly, aware of something settling into place. Justice isn't loud. It doesn't argue. It removes what doesn't belong and moves forward, leaving only a clean record behind. That silence followed me out. Steady and complete. Proof that control returns when facts replace performance, and patience finally outweighs fear inside the system at work now. By the next morning, the office felt different. Julian's badge no longer worked. Her calendar vanished. Her name disappeared from active projects without announcement or explanation. The system adjusted faster than people ever could. By noon, everyone knew. Even if no one said it out loud. Scott called me into his office shortly after lunch. He didn't congratulate me. He didn't apologize. He slid a folder across the desk and said, "You'll be leading the project going forward. No ceremony, just responsibility." Authority followed quietly, the way it always should. The client call that afternoon confirmed everything. The revised strategy landed clean, numbers aligned, direction held. Questions were thoughtful instead of suspicious. When the meeting ended, the client thanked me for clarity and discipline. That was enough. Work moved on. That's the part people rarely talk about. There was no celebration, no victory lap, just momentum restored. The project recovered, then advanced, stronger for having survived stress. Success doesn't announce justice. It assumes it, by the end of the week. The results were visible. Timelines stabilized. Decisions flowed without friction. I had access where it mattered, and accountability where it counted. I didn't change how I worked. I no longer had to hide it. I thought about Julian once, briefly, not with anger, with distance. She had confused access with ownership, visibility with value. Systems are unforgiving to that mistake. I didn't feel triumphant, and I didn't feel rescued. What I felt was alignment, my work, my authority, and the record finally pointed in the same direction. That alignment is rare. And it doesn't come from confrontation. It comes from patience, from letting truth accumulate quietly until denial becomes impossible and consequences become procedural rather than emotional. It lasts longer than anger ever could, especially inside systems built to remember everything without bias or mercy. I shut down my laptop at the end of the day and logged out slowly, deliberately, aware of the irony settling in. She hacked my account to see what I was hiding. I let her open 9 files. Only one of us logged out unemployed. When you stop reacting and start recording, power quietly shifts back to you. Systems remember even when people pretend not to. If you've ever felt invisible. This story wasn't meant to make you angry. It was meant to remind you that patience can be louder than confrontation. How did this story make you feel? Was there a moment that stayed with you? or a detail that felt uncomfortably familiar, if you're willing. I'd love to hear your story too. Where are you listening from right now? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if this resonated, a like, a share, or a quiet subscription helps more stories like this find the right people.